While every cozy game has its charm, the premise of Tiny Bookshop seemed engineered in a lab specifically for me. Since childhood, I've had a series of pipe dreams that include opening a bookstore, running away to a seaside town, and having a space that I can decorate as gaudily as I please for spooky season. Not to mention the game's early stated obsession with garlic, and it quickly appeared to be a video game turned quicksand trap meant to ensnare me. But despite all the allure, is the game as good as it is hyped to be? Just to warn, this review does contain some spoilers. Within seconds of launching Tiny Bookshop, 2 other games were immediately brought to mind: Stardew Valley and the Untitled Goose Game. The former was relevant because of the stated purpose at the outset of the game. You're leaving everything behind to move to a seaside town full of quaint characters. With little else than bare bones infrastructure and the advice of some overly nosy neighbors, you're meant to start a local empire of some kind or another. The comparisons to Stardew Valley don't end there though, and it's not like either Tiny Bookshop or Stardew own the corner on cozy games selling an escapist fantasy. I'll get back to this in a second. Tiny Bookshop was evocative of Untitled Goose Game because of its art style and color palette. The quasi-2D animation style is as simple, relatively speaking, as it is effective. Although comparisons can be made between the 2 games, Tiny Bookshop has enough of its own distinct flair to be noticeably different. While I found Tiny Bookshop's art style to be unique enough, some of the game's design choices came across as simplistic and even a little lazy. The game had an annoying habit of telling and not showing during important cutscenes. Other than the handful of story characters, the clothing details of most NPCs were lacking in variety, leading NPC interactions to feel very generic and procedurally generated. The NPC clipping and clown car type physics of the game were also a little wacky. I get it. This is 1, a cozy game generally catering to lower maintenance audiences. 2, it's largely set in a tiny bookshop. And 3, colon-based Neoludic Games isn't exactly a AAA game studio. That said, it felt like more effort could have been put into making the game cleaner and less repetitive. The game is clearly meant to be a personal and personable experience. At times, the art choices and NPC design felt more like the cold, calculating world of Roller Coaster Tycoon than an escapist cozy game. Setting aside my immediate impressions of the game, I did find the overall story and its characters to be engaging and worthwhile, if a bit derivative at times. From Tilda's nosy know-it-all quips to Fern's bashful bookishness to Moira's goth babe vibes, the game features a cast of lovable characters with consistent personalities. Certain details had me absolutely chortling, like the Buxtonbury Local Association of Business Leadership and Administration, or blah blah for short, which confirmed that the town is basically run by a bunch of gossipy aunties. The quirkiness of the dialogue options, such as the aforementioned garlic bit, led to real consequences in the game that are clearly intended to make new playthroughs worth it. Overall, Tiny Bookshop did a great job of dropping me in Buxtonbury and making me feel like these were, or at least could be, real people. Just like with other good cozy games, I found myself during the workday wanting to return to the game to continue interacting with these characters and seeing where their story arcs would go. I specifically want to give a shout out to the game's nods to accessibility, which is an undersung theme in gaming and the wider digital world alike. I also really liked the central premise of the game. You're not just mindlessly selling books to people who come into the shop. There is a challenge, albeit not a terribly big one, in choosing how many books of a given genre to stock, given the limited space that you have. Different locations in town tend to sell certain genres more or less, and beyond books, the choices you make in decor also affect what you will likely sell. All of these elements come together to form a fun optimization puzzle that strikes a harmonious balance. It is both challenging enough to keep more serious players hooked, while ultimately not being critical enough that more casual players couldn't just ignore it if they wanted to. That to me is the hallmark of a game studio that knows how to cater to the cozy game audience well. One major aspect of the optimization puzzle that's at the center of the game is the book recommendation mechanic. While selling books between sunrise and sunset of any given day, most of your sales will come from the normies who hop in to buy a few books and then leave. Some of these customers will also ask for your help in finding a title, which can be made all the more difficult or easy depending on what you have in stock. Certain little details made it clear that the game devs put a lot of intention into this mechanic, like limiting the number of genres to 7, but making certain books available across different genres. I generally liked this mechanic, as it was at times challenging and hysterically funny to see how a customer might react to a certain recommendation. The game even added some real-life books to my TBR list. As with the NPC design though, the entire book selling process, including the recommendation mechanic, was a little bit repetitive. The game only has so many books, and you end up selling the same titles over and over again. I found this to be especially true of children's books. this. I couldn't tell you the number of times I sold Newtonian physics for babies to the same story character over and over again. Trying to amass a large number of books in a certain genre only goes so far to fix this problem, as does progressing in the game. The dialogue of the book recommendation mechanic was also very robotic. At times I felt like I could see the functions and string concatenation used to create this dialogue, as the speech was so repetitive and disjointed. Successive sentences would be grammatically correct, yet conceptually unrelated to each other. The entire dialogue often seemed nonsensical a lot of the time, to the point where I felt like I was kind of interacting with discount ChatGPT and not a well-crafted video game. Another mechanic that I found frustrating was the decentralized and kind of chaotic quest system, which was at times confusing and vague. These qualities led me to completing quests a lot slower than necessary, or failing to do so in the required season due to a lack of adequate information. This whole experience reminded me of another game with a really cryptic quest system. Something tells me that this isn't what Tiny Bookshop's designers were going for. Admittedly, these critiques are me being kind of nitpicky. A lot of people, maybe even most people, would either not notice these flaws or simply not care. By themselves, I don't think I would notice as much, but there was one other major flaw that made these smaller flaws stand out. As I got deeper into the game, I noticed that Tiny Bookshop struggled to take inspiration from other titles in the world of cozy gaming while also establishing its own distinct identity. This is a key struggle for any video game, but it seems to hit the cozy genre really hard. I mentioned before that there were many similarities to Stardew Valley. No one similarity was unique to Stardew Valley alone, to be sure. An example of this is the 28-day season calendar and all of the seasonal events and birthdays that go along with it. Such a calendar is also available in The Sims 4, My Time at Portia, and a lot of other sandbox or cozy games. Another big example is the anti-corporate, anti-capitalist themes embedded in the town's struggle with Mega Marché, the Tiny Bookshop equivalent of JojaMart. A lot of these elements started piling up, though, to the point where it felt like Tiny Bookshop relied too heavily on one of the goats of gaming for inspiration. I love Stardew Valley as much as the next girl, trust me. If I'm gonna drop $20 US on a game though, it better have enough of its own legs to stand on. The art style is good, the gameplay is fun, there are relatively few bugs, and there are lots of details and Easter eggs and Lucy Dacus references such that the game has enough of its own soul. The excessive borrowing from Stardew, however, distracted from that soul. Some of the flaws that I mentioned, such as repetitive book titles, robotic dialogue, and homogeneous NPC design, could be fixed with updates. I know Neoludic has been releasing bug fixes since the game came out, and I'm curious to see what, if anything, this indie studio does to expand this title a bit. I think some other expansions, such as adding a few more story characters, could even emphasize the game's strengths and not just fix its weaknesses. Unfortunately, some of the other flaws, such as leaning too heavily on inspiration from other cozy games, are baked into the game at this point. Not everyone is going to be bothered by that though. Overall, I think that this is a welcome addition to the world of indie cozy games, as familiar as it may be. I'm also curious to see how this game's commercial success will further inspire the German government to help make Germany a global leader in game development. I intend to keep playing this game a bit more, as I do think that this game is well worth playing. The true test for this game is, once I set it down, will I come back? And if not, was the $20 price point worth the one and done experience? These lingering questions lead me to recommend buying this game on sale, however small the sale, if you intend to play it. Don't forget to catch me on Twitch for live streams of Stardew Valley, Elden Ring, and maybe some spooky season appropriate titles. Who knows, maybe you'll even find me streaming my Tiny Bookshop playthrough. Thanks so much for watching, and don't forget to like and subscribe. So sleepy.